Welcome, everybody, to our Agile Austin Leaders Special Interest Group. It's fun to be here on February 7th, 2025. See a lot of faces that I know already, new folks too. So let's do this, okay? Let's do this. We're going to start off with introductions. Max Cassie here. I'm also the president of Agile Austin, have been for the last 4 years. And I founded and started my own software development shop, Carpe Diem Technology Services, last year. It's been great. It's awesome. And ping me offline if you want to hear more about that and stuff. But I was a founder, and I've been facilitating the Leader SIG for 15 years now. Wow. And it never gets old. It never gets old. Thank you, Matt. Longest
yeah, but we do.
Even though some
we do. We get old.
And less about me. It's not about me. Okay. We meet the first Friday of every month. We might skip some months from time to time, but we meet, we share ideas, we talk about anything that can help us lead agile transformations by leveraging agile values and principles and delivering customer value faster and better every time. Right? And we have Keep Austin Agile coming up. Do you see it here right behind me? There you go. Our annual conference that has been going on for 12 years now on April 24th. I'm just going to drop some links in the chat. So, you know, the links to CA and hold on. There you go. So I'm going to drop some of the links. It's going to be so much fun. We actually have identified, we have our keynote speaker, Jay Basso is great. He's here in Austin. He started the Austin Forum of Technology and Society, and great speaker, and just great to have him there, right? And we have selected all of our speakers. We got a lot of cool folks from AI to product to culture, transformational stuff. They're all going to be shared in the coming week or two. We've selected them, and they're coming up. And let's go on. As I said, the board, we're great folks. We have we're a very successful organization, 501c nonprofit, you know, and I just love the folks I'm presently serving with on the board. I always tell everybody, definitely send us an email at board@agileaustin.org to tell us how great we are. Okay. So going on, we have membership and sponsorship that is always available. And I am so excited because as a board, our focus now is giving back to membership and sponsors. And we do a lot of great stuff. The membership is $35 per year. And our sponsors right now is Agile Velocity, Resumex, and Ad Ameliora. We love our sponsors. They support us. They make a lot possible for us. And we actually give back a lot to the community. We have an average anywhere between 6 to 10 virtual meetups every month. And then we have the in-person one here in Austin that are quarterly now. There were the days pre-pandemic when we were doing it monthly, but the pandemic just changed a lot. It just changed a lot. So we don't meet as much in person, but we meet a lot more in general, right? And let me put someone on mute because I've got the power. Yay. And I tell people, hey, go to the meetup page, right? I'll first put here in the chat the info and our sponsors. Tell people, go to the meetup and subscribe. I'm putting a bunch of links in chat and everything. Because once you subscribe to the meetup page, which we have 7,600 plus members, then you get all the notifications of all our events. Whether we do Zoom meetups, in-person meetups, conferences, anything we do, Once you subscribe on Meetup, you get a notification. And we also put stuff, I put in the chat. We have a YouTube channel that is getting close to 200 videos out there of all, I mean, the meetups like this one too is going to be on there like in the next day or two. And we just provide this free content for the community because we've got nothing but love for an Agilist, and that's what we do, right? Oh, we even give scholarships. For goodness sakes, this is awesome. And we are in the process of doing our first scholarship this year. More to come out there. But for our members and for people that have been active in our community, we have this whole process of having to apply and to get scholarships for training courses and certifications or whatever the case it may be. That can be up into the thousands. And this is a big deal for us because we're giving back to our membership. We're giving back to our community that has always supported us, right? And if you want to take your time and take this QR code, our main platinum sponsor, Agile Velocity, gives 15% off on the certification courses. So if there's anything anybody might be thinking of, certified Scrum Master, Cal Leader, all these various things, hey, volunteers. I always tell people we are open to have volunteers at any time because there's always stuff that we're trying to do. There's COD that is coming up. We've got awesome core planning committees for all of the work that has to go, but we're going to need volunteers on the day of, on April 24th. We've got volunteers for some opportunities for things that we have to do now from a sponsorship management perspective and some other things. So just go to the site and make an inquiry. As we're coming up to Matt, we're going to hear from Matt today. Love it. We're going to have our CA, taking a break between now and CA because there's a lot going on. Our main conference is going to be the focus for the next couple of months. And we're having CA in April. And then May, we're going to come back in May with Robert Woodcock. Woody also, he goes by. And I see that he's here also. And he's going to talk to us about an adaptability balance scorecard. Okay, way to go. So that's what is going to happen from now till we hit the summer for the Leader SIG. So as we transition between us and Matt, our speaker for today, which I've got to say, as I stop sharing, I would like to ask everybody to turn on their camera if they can, and we'll take a Brady Bunch picture like these ones that you see here, right? Because that's what we can do on virtual meetings to feel connected. Let's take a Brady Bunch picture. So take your time, but there, Jeff. I see both Jeffs. Yes. I see Morgan. Yes. Who else? Alan, I see you. Yes. All right. Hey, Ben Rogers, I know you're there, Ben. There you go. Okay, let's do it. Now act as if you're excited. There you go, Nad. Peace sign, okay? 3, 2, 1. I got it. All right, cool. I'll be sharing that on the meetup, okay? I'll post it. So, with that said, I'd like to transition over to Matt. I've known Matt for 15 years, Matt, 16. Who's counting now, right? And I've always appreciated the thought leader that Matt is, what he brings to the table. He was in Austin. Now he's in Seattle. He abandoned us, but we still love him, okay? And we're talking today about compensation. I feel that a lot of times it's not spoken enough because compensation drives a lot of things, behavior, culture. It has an influence in so many things. So Matt Roberts, talk to us today. Thank you.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Great to see folks that are new, and especially folks who might have seen this content maybe for the 4th time now, because it's actually This is the fourth time I've done this. The first time was at the Agile Awesome Leader SIG in 2015. Hard to believe it was 10 years ago when I put the first version of this presentation together. It was in person, and then it was active. I had activities and stuff like that, and of course the ubiquitous sticky notes. So we don't have that as much today, and I'm not as quite as awesome as doing the online facilitation and making it interactive, but I'd love it if folks just interrupt me. Just I hopefully I will see hands raised, but I might not. So just feel free to chime in, or Max or any of the folks, if you say like, hey, there's a question in the chat, I'll stop.
So
Just one thing, who might know why I've chosen this particular background for this slide deck? Any thoughts?
Do you have to play the Wizard of Oz at the same time?
Okay, that's next level deep, which I actually did do.
Try it with Alice in Wonderland.
20
Not
thoughts? Any guesses?
Not their best album.
All
Top
right.
two.
So people know that this is the album cover for Dark Side of the Moon, but there is by Pink Floyd, there is a song on that called Money, and that's the big giveaway. So let's talk
Matt,
a bit about,
sorry.
yeah.
Do you want to go in presentation mode or do you want to stay like that?
I hate
Okay, no, I mean
presentation mode,
optional.
but,
Just
I
asking.
could try it. I don't know. What is it? Is it share? Is it slideshow? What the hell do you do with this stuff?
Could
Share.
be slideshow.
Just share.
Yeah,
Just click
no.
share.
No, because that's not the share.
No, that's right.
Oh, okay.
This is what I hate. The sharing
go.
doesn't share. This is what drives me bananas with these things. It's like, you want to
I mean,
share
if
it.
that's okay for you, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Here's a bit about me and today, and how to contact me at the end. Just brief background for those who don't know me. I've been a practicing agilist, pragmatic agilist for a real long time. Before, actually technically before there was an Agile manifesto, I suppose. VP of engineering now. I've held lots of roles that are either as software developer, team lead, leader of product engineering, customer support, you name it. Most of the way that I think is in terms of Agile and how people have sort of, embraced change to benefit stakeholders. And then because I'm more on the people side, engineering always had a lot of people in it, then it made a lot of sense to think a lot about how people work, then the product and technology, and then the process, essentially in that order. So people, products and technology, and then process. So compensation is such an interesting thing because from a lean or systems engineer, what am I really? Well, I'm a systems engineer. Like that's sort of like if you had to take all the titles away, it's like, how do you get these like really interesting, complex systems of people, products, technology, customers, business stakeholders, the company itself, potential investors, government regulators, you name it. How do you get this all working together? And a big piece of that, because capitalism is mostly immutable, right? Like we're in a thing where it's like, well, capitalism matters. Like you can't just ignore that. And compensation, the reason I called it deeper, darker, there was the deep secrets, then it was the deeper, darker secrets. And now I don't know, I didn't want to put another superfluous adjective on it, but like every time I do it, I like sort of go a bit deeper. So that's what this is about. What you're going to get today is some of my thoughts about how you make compensation work for yourself, for your team, for your company, for your organization, and be agile at the same time. So, and I'm going to give it to you in terms of like, here's kind of what I believe, like this is my opinion, my strong opinion. And then here's what I've seen work and not work in small company, medium company, and then large company. And I've worked at all of these types. So I think it sort of works in nonprofit sector too. And I did this conversation with the ATX HR meetup group, and it seemed like people were interested in that. Haven't talked as much in the government sector. So, but I suspect that some of the things could work too. Moving on. Oh, there we go. It's not just for software development. It's a mindset focusing on customer value and being responsive to change. Is this clipping the bottom of the slide out, this view for y'all?
A little bit, yeah.
Just
Yeah.
a bit.
I might,
Just a bit.
might go back to the the other way.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's the lyric from Money. If you're musically inclined, and sort of we think that's right, like get a good job, more pay, you're okay, like kind of that's kind of true. And I want to go into a little bit about like where that sort of falls apart. It's like I got mine, you got yours, and it's like it sort of capitalism kind of does that, but at the same time it sort of works against our whole team and agile and people like sacrificing themselves for a greater good kind of thing. So I won't go too much into the history, but you can read this at some point. But I've done this a few times, and it keeps getting better or longer. I love starting with the Agile Manifesto and the principles here, and I'm just gonna pick this one. So there's 12 of them, if I recall correctly, and the one is like build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support they need, and trust them to get the job done. So I think as agilists, a lot of us we like this. Like we want motivated individuals. This can get some people say autonomy. I like to say ownership with agency. Like what do I own? Who do I support? All those kinds of things. Um, the question is kind of like, yeah, but it stops. It stops at some point where it's like, well, yeah, but I got to get paid, right? Like I got a family, I've got a house, I've got house payments, I've got all these kinds of things. I've got this global macroeconomic that, and certainly in software development, booms and busts. It sort of stopped busting between 2012 and 2022, but for those of us who've been around since the 1990s or whatever, like we've seen it sort of come and go, and it's important, it's critical, and it drives people's behavior, right? So you can say, hey, don't worry about money because you got such a great team and environment, and it's like, yeah, that's cool, but I got to get paid, right? So we did this activity. I'm just going to highlight it here. I'm going through some of the stuff pretty quickly. But we did this like, okay, I had said, what are some of the intrinsic and we're actually, I didn't give it away. I'm giving it away now. It's like, what are some of the things that you all think motivate people in their jobs? And, here's some stickies, go off and let's put them together, and then we can discuss and then work with moderator, group them in a few categories, which I did. I was the moderator, and we saw these kinds of things get into these two different types of categories, which got into like extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. Extrinsic being sort of like the external things like compensation and stuff like that, and intrinsic the work itself. And there's a lot of things. I won't go through all of them, but like I think most people I'm going to talk about, I'll just reference the Daniel Pink video that I think many of us have seen, but there's a link to it in this presentation about mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And what we got here is like what are the extrinsic things: job, money, salary, bonus, legal. Somebody said booze. um, pet benefits, meals, vacation, PTO, and those were all sort of things that are like extrinsic. And the intrinsic stuff was kind of like the work, the growth, the learning, all that kind of stuff. And if you look at these arrows here, we said like, well, the manager kind of, there's the team on the right. If you look about like sort of halfway down and team members, that like a lot of what happens on the right is a lot responsible of the team. Like, do I like the people I work with? I'm motivated because I like the team I work with. Yeah, the company and the mission sounds cool, but I like the people I work with and I feel responsible to them. And the manager was kind of like, if you see that arrow, the team sort of goes to the right. The manager goes across all, right? So that helps too. But like the manager really is the extrinsic motivator kind of thing. And so that's what this talk is about. You're a manager or you want to know more about, your manager and what your manager has to deal with, and then like help your manager, or if you're a manager, help yourself do things that maximize, people along this process, just not just, all the good agile stuff that we talk about, but it's also the compensation that we don't. So, this was sort of my intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Just my story here. It's kind of like I took a year off. I call it my pre-tirement in 2008, and I walked away from a good paying job. That wasn't my W-2 or whatever. It was like one, and I took a year off and I traveled and went to the national parks and took lots of pictures and all these kinds of things. It was really fun. I thought maybe I'd even become a photographer, like a landscape photographer. And then I realized after doing that for a while. Nobody pays money for landscape photography. And then I put it under Flickr back in the day, and I put all my photography under Creative Commons, and it was kind of fun to see everybody use it. So here's sort of like this intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I came back to Austin and then worked and got a paycheck again, but it was a great year off. Yeah, Max, go for it. And you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't sure if we could put a question in now or not, right? Just
Yeah, go for
very
it.
quickly, because this is such a strong topic, and knowing the like versus like intrinsic versus extrinsic and talking about it and everything. But I've experienced a few times that when I get traction on this, when I work in large enterprises and trying to get galvanized people and like around this, there's that feeling that I get that people are like, yeah, this is great, but there's going to be a reorg in a few weeks and there's going to be layoffs and stuff like that. And all these things that we're talking about, it's almost as if people go back into survival mode. Like,
Yep.
it's great to know about this and talk about it, but hey, I just, as you said before, I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got
Right.
family to take care of. I've got my loved ones, blah, blah, blah. You know what? This is great, but I'm just going to pay attention exactly to what my boss wants in my report document, blah, blah, blah. So how do you think we can get past that? Or maybe just switch
Yeah.
jobs, or I don't know.
Right. So this presentation I'm about to get into is going to talk a little bit about that, because there's certainly things that are in your control, and there's the things that you can influence in the world. And of course, the more that you pay attention to the things that you control, i.e. your job and your contribution and all that kind of stuff, you typically get more like control over that which you can influence, and Stephen Covey 7 Habits kind of stuff. But it's true, right? Like, if you're doing, in general, if you can understand the value, and I think lean and a lot of these things, like, start exposing a lot of these things, like, where's the customer value and where is it not, if you can align yourself with customer value. And this is not like it's harder if you're doing time and materials like a consulting. It's like, okay, well, that's clear. If I'm billable, then good. If not, bad. But also, even within a software product development company, what is that customer value? That's not the subject of today, but I'm gonna sort of touch on that for a second.
Awesome.
And then
Thank
there's
you.
some things that you just can't do anything about. And I think that's the message here. It's kind of like, well, okay, you can't do that. It's a constraint, but let's get creative on what we can do. For those of you who haven't watched, this is now getting to be an old video. This is actually pretty fun to watch the guys animating while they're giving a talk about, Daniel Pink is giving a talk about this, mastery, autonomy, and purpose, which I think a lot of people have. We're in a different world now than when this came out. I mean, people do talk about, it's not just that they want to like do a good job, but companies are better now than they used to be, because it's just more efficient that, the people that we have should be contributing to value. And in 2025, that's more clear than ever, because we're going through this gigantic reduction. And so it's kind of like people have to make this hard choice, and they're going to make the choice not just on the people who cost the least, but it's like who can help contribute to value more than anything else. But like, it's a good video. Watch it if you'd like to. It's in the presentation. So, but also, yeah, but I'll start. Was that something, Jeff? Did or Marcus? Cool. So compensating individuals. So I do want to start with this from a manager. My guidance to people is like, work with individuals to talk about their career capital. And we're going to get into like all these constraints, like, well, there's no raise pool, there's no this, there's no that. Like, you're doing two people's jobs now, like all the things that are the reality of 2025. The important thing from a manager perspective is I stole this from a former CEO of Motive, who some of you knew back in Austin. We talked about career capital. It's like, that's the thing that you get to take with you for your entire life, right? Like, you can't, it's essentially immutable as long as, your brain is mostly working and stuff like that. It's like the ability to do what you've learned, your wisdom, and the things that you are interested and enjoy. And so as a manager, really working with people to get them aligned on how they want to grow and what they want to learn is super powerful, right? If you follow the Agile Manifesto principles and value, generally that will resonate with people. If you consider this sort of mastery, like, I like human beings typically like to, especially knowledge workers, like to get really good at something. They like to have the ability to either be autonomous or have like high levels of agency to do the work that they do, and they like that work to connect to some broader purpose. I always say, and I don't do typically well in really big companies, despite the fact that today I work for a 3,500 person company. Everybody is a one-off exception, and I think that's okay. Like there's big systems that work, and it's like you got to, as much as possible, treat everybody uniquely because humans are unique. The other thing you can do is like you can help your team like intrinsically motivate their colleagues. All the things that you can say as a manager is like, hey, maybe instead of you doing this thing that you're an expert at, you could have somebody shadow you and maybe they do the code, you do a design review, something like that. And there's all sorts of patterns that we have in software development to encourage that level of, like, in the old days they used to call it apprenticeship, and sort of as you know got more and more knowledge, and you would the people that had a lot of experience and knowledge would then teach those other people. We sort of screwed it up in software development by like outsourcing a bunch of stuff and then like breaking that. Although in the new ways I've done it where we actually had people that were not full-time employees, and some of those people helped train some of the people that we had. So anyway, there's always different ways of looking at things, but it's always like art of the possible. How can you do it? And then what engages the team members? And so that's kind of like, here's your manager's toolbox. And what you could tell your manager is like, here's a model of like helping things, like this is how I see the world. This is what I want to, how I want to grow and learn, and that will make me more engaged. And in general, folks that are engaged, and if they're engaged on something that's valuable and they're learning and they're growing, their contribution is increasing, they'll tend to make more money over time, assuming the market is growing. More on that in a second. There's this book, Steve McConnell, Rapid Development. We actually had Steve McConnell. It was one of my fanista fanboy moments at Agile Austin when I got him to talk at Agile Austin. It was really, really neat. This is a book I read back in the early 90s, I think. And you can sort of see like salary and like what motivates people. There's programmer, analysts, managers, general population. Salary isn't number one. So this is just like my beating a slightly dead horse, saying like it's not all about compensation, but it's not about compensation either. Don't ignore it. So let's get into this extrinsic motivation, because I think that's the thing that people have in the Agile world, this is the thing that people have the most, challenging like bit with. You see Bart on the left. This is one of my favorite episodes back from they were making fun of the startups and the dot-coms and things like that. And it's like, does that motivate people? It sort of kind of did for a while, and then maybe not as much after .com, and then maybe not as much after 2023 either. You've got kind of the person getting paid and the guy with all the money too. Like there's a lot of models for compensation and accumulation of wealth in our world. So I'm going to run us through some assumptions. You're a manager or an IC. You want to know how compensation works at companies, and you don't control everything, because often very few of us do. Even the CEO kind of doesn't, because they have complex relationships with boards and people folks and all those kinds of things. I assume that you understand extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, and you basically, the power that you have as a manager to lead with the intrinsic stuff, because almost all of that is within your control. You're not trying to do an experiment with team-led compensation efforts. More on that later. We had some Mary Poppendiek, I think that was who was talking about that, the elephant in the room, which was an amazing presentation that is not publicly available, but I have a link to it and I shared it. So you're going to have that in a bit, with teams trying to experiment with models of compensating each other and how disastrous that was. And of course, take everything with a grain of salt. May not apply. Context is key. You have been warned. And I'm going to stop for a question after, and I'll shut up in a moment here, because I'm going to talk about my maxims here. These are my tenets, rules, maxims, whatever you want to call it. All salaries are driven by market forces of supply and demand. So, your years of experience, within a domain, within technology, within an organization, are essentially meaningless for sweeping market changes. It's a reality. That's capitalism. It's your responsibility as a manager to serve your team and help them develop that career capital that will serve them and serve you, right? Like, I mean, let's be real, like, because manager wants to do their job, and their job is having an effective team, right? So manager is an IC of sorts, just a different kind of IC. And so you have to do this. It's the responsibility of you as a manager to do both at the same time. I think in terms of paying value, to a team, an organization, a customer base above all else. So thinking about the value that's being delivered by folks. It's kind of hard to do, right? Like, okay, well, stuff is, hey, you're a manager. You signed up for some really hard things that have lots of ambiguity. This is one of them. How do you define value? What does contribution mean? What does impact mean? Again, sort of easy in a time and materials kind of thing, or ish easy, but less so if you're doing product development, internal IT, those kinds of things. Um, I always love like asking these questions, like, in what world would I be happy to pay more? Like, I'd actually be happy to pay more. If you as a manager can tell that to somebody, you can probably, as an individual contributor, you can probably tell it to your manager or some other compensation committee. It's like, and all of a sudden you start saying, okay, I have to actually define what contribution means and how that aligns with value. This is one that I just added. The World is Flat, which is this book about like sort of like labor can happen anywhere. And, there's people that are, running companies, maybe even in this room, that have access to much lower cost labor that's in other countries. And it's true. Now, the reason that I'm saying, so two things that are truer now than they were 10 years ago. It's getting flatter after COVID, because when many of us went home and worked from home, all this kind of like assumptions about like you need to be in the office, you need to be in Seattle, you need to be in Austin, like started going out the door, because like companies did pretty damn well in 2021, 2022, and 2023. It's like record profits, record returns. We can talk about RTO, return to office, in a moment, but like the evidence shows that companies did phenomenally well during that time. Average productivity per employee went up just because like the revenue went up, right? And there's zero interest, and there's all these other kinds of things that happen to macroeconomic conditions. But it's like it started working. And this whole like argument of like, well, I have one here, and a CEO of mine said this to me in 2005, like, I can get 3 in some other place, right? And I was like, well, I could probably get 20 for one. Like, what what are you actually trying to measure here, right? Like, well, our competitors have 3 for one in this outsourced scenario. The reason that I'm, you know, and the thing that I would say today is the folks that are in those other countries that are not the US. It's not like back in the day in 2005, I would say, when I first started doing this, their skill level was lower. They just were lower, especially dealing with ambiguity and like the ability to say, I don't know, and work together through all this ambiguity, especially different, won't get into like different cultures have different perspectives and things like that. And it's like can be really hard if people won't tell you they don't know, won't tell you what the truth is, are afraid of like doing anything because it'll make them look bad, all those kinds of things. Where in the US, we're sort of like cowboy, whatever, like just go make mistakes and, it'll figure itself out kind of thing. Again, I'm not trying to engage in cultural stereotypes, but saying like it was very problematic back then. The world has changed, my friends. And some of the folks that are on my teams, like the ones that are not in the US are some of the best engineers. And it's like I get to the point where I'm like, it doesn't really make any difference where people are. It's like their ability to contribute with a team to go deliver results, right? And so this is just some models. And I'm saying these are the things that it's like these are relatively hard constraints that I have to build a system within that. I'll pause for a second before I go on to like, okay, given all this, like what have I figured out? Okay. Couple other ones. These are the main, not the mainest. Greg Cadwar, great VP of engineering at Motive back in the day, said he would say, Matt, assume all your team members' salaries are gonna be somebody gonna print it out and they're gonna post it up on the wall. Now that's me doing a Greg from many years ago, but it's like you don't do that. But the reason that model, like we don't post salaries up on the wall typically, but the reason that model works is that it's sort of like now you start thinking about the fact like, well, am I scared if Jeff's salary is made public and Max's salary is made public, at least to each other, they're going to get pissed off about it, right? Then you're sort of like, well, maybe I need a system. Maybe I need something to like, I can't just sort of say, I like this person, I like that person, because people talk, despite company regulations, thou shalt be fired, whatever. I'm like, get over it. I mean, people are sharing it on Blind. They're doing all this kind of stuff now. The employees have all the information. Nothing is secret. Forget about it. So having a plan to deal like when it happens, and that's why I say the range of your salary and your compensation should be true to itself. And really try hard not to give into exceptions. Like exceptions are okay, but it should make sense. Oh, this person is a kernel driver expert. There's 3 of them in the world. Maybe that person is a senior software engineer, but it's like, yeah, but they're 3 levels above in band because there's like nobody else. And if we depend on that kernel level driver, expertise, and we don't have it, then the business is cratered overnight, right? I always say like seek to get more control of your budget, the dollars, not the head count, giving you as a manager like the freedom and flexibility to spend it as you will. Um, have a career ladder with explicit criteria for jobs, which is great because now you can post jobs and people will know what it is that they will be doing and what is expected of them. Not a bunch of like nice to haves and, sort of like perfunctory, flowery, like, things that it's like, you look at those like desire to grow and learn. I'm like, I don't like desire. How do you measure desire, right? It's like sort of stupid. It's also like super non-inclusive, those like old school job descriptions. They're like you're pushing people away with almost all of them. Like you're typically pushing women away with those jobs. There's research that backs it up, and that's sort of stupid. Like, why would you not want the best talent and have the best people that can come in and have different perspectives to solve ambiguous problems? Like, that's a stupid thing. Don't do that. Um, have a mental, if you don't have like a ladder and like a system with job descriptions and sort of how they work and like moving to criteria, if you want to go from software engineer 2 to software engineer 3, this is what it looks like. This is what good looks like. At least have a mental model for it, right? And it's like, make sure your current team fits in. There's other teams in the world, but make sure your team approximately fits in. There's these different this is just one levels. FYI, I used to do pay scale or something like that. They have all these ways of finding like, here's what it works like at Amazon or Microsoft or Nordstrom. Like this is the like sort of the different levels. This is how the pay maps to it. So there's actually quite a bit of information about these like these bands, these salary bands, and if you map them to these like levels, and I said 5 to 7 for software engineers, 3 to 5 for product managers, blah blah blah, you start building out a model, and you can do it like you can get 80% pretty darn quickly, especially if you have a team of like 2 or 3 people banded together with you. HR would be nice, but you don't need HR to do this kind of stuff. Um, Personal judgment based on situation, never forget intrinsic, and maintain sharp situational awareness. One of the things you were talking about, Max, is like, okay, my job might go away. And it's like, I've literally told this to people. It's like, yep, it might. And therefore, here's this job. Here's our contribution review system. Here's like the levels. Here's what excellent looks like. Are you talking with your manager and making sure that all of your precious time is going to these kinds of efforts, right? So, and do you have documented evidence that you made this contribution? Because then that can be used in your promotion review. It can be reviewed in your performance or contribution review. It can also be put on your resume. And I tell people that like, here's a thing, star, situation, task, action, result. You can actually write this stuff, and now you've got another bullet for your resume. And that's great fodder for job interviews. And people said, Matt, do you want me to leave? I was like, no, I don't want you to leave at all. I want you to be here together and do awesome things forever. At the same time, I'm a pragmatist. I know that companies fail and the economy changes without any sort of like anybody asking me about it. So if you're always focused on that, that model can really help you and help your team. Um,
Yeah, and Matt, and if I
for it.
may just say, I think that's brilliant because you address the elephant in the room, right? It could happen that there's a reorg, there's a workforce reduction, or there are things that could happen that could have an impact on you. Let's just plan accordingly. If that happens, it happens, and we're better prepared for it.
That's
All
right.
right.
That's
And
right.
stuff like that. And the other thing I wanted to say very quickly, I love the fact that you talked about the salary ranges and stuff because for my 20 plus years of corporate America, big tech, I could never understand why we had very well-defined salary ranges for level 1, level 2, level 3. Then when it got up to senior manager or director or VP, the ranges were not shared, right? As it went up. And
Right.
so I've always thought to myself, why bother sharing any of them if you're not going to share all the way, right? It's like, because there was some concerns with sharing like that information about how much certain positions were making. And I thought that was interesting to see that, oh, we can be transparent about salary ranges only up to a certain point,
Right.
and then not. And so it's,
Yeah. And,
so,
and certainly the more senior leader that you have, a lot of it is the comp is kind of not, I mean, I would say at Amazon, I was at AWS for a while, and all the executives, the salary cap didn't make any difference who you were. The salary cap in Seattle was $160,000 a year. Nobody made more than $160,000 a year, but that wasn't the compensation, right? Like
it
the
was
compensation
stocks.
means restricted stock option or restricted stock unit. So it gets, you start changing the model of compensation as you go, where it's not just, and I'll talk about this in a second, it's not just about cash, it's about like the ability to share in the success of the company. And we see this with stock options. I mean, which are, I've had stock options at probably 10 companies, and I think one of them made a little bit of money. So like stock options are like a huge maybe of a thing. That's okay. I didn't like, people like think I had 2 billion on paper, and it's like, well, yeah, fun thing to have on paper. Anyway, final word back to Max's. It's like he might have been anticipating. Be transparent with your team as much as possible about how it works, whether it's the system or the system you're working in. Be honest with people where they stand. And I have had this conversation with people like, if you want to make more money, this was very an Austin kind of thing and a Seattle thing. If you want to go, I know what the salaries were at Amazon. If that's what you want to do, I can tell you exactly what the salary that you'll be going into there. I know what you're here and I know that you're there. If that's what you need to maximize on, for you and your family, you should do it. Like if you think there's better growth there. Now, I will also tell you some of the pros and cons of life at Amazon. So like know what you're signing up for too. So like, but I think if you can help your team and or service to your team, then people will tend to say like, oh, I trust that person and I'm probably going to stick around. And I've had people tell me, I'm thinking of doing this. And I'm like, okay, cool. How can I help? And it's like, it doesn't affect like whether they would get a promotion or something. Ooh, somebody's thinking about getting another job. Like, I don't know, like, I'm sure they think about lots of things every day. Behave ethically. If you can just sort of like be transparent and ethical, then you just don't have to worry about things. The system sort of takes care of itself. So here's some like specific stuff. Understand the market, what you can pay in terms of cash. I showed levels, FYI, but there's others. There's Glassdoor, there's PayScale. If you're on Blind, Blind, it's a little app where everybody shares everything about what's all your team members are sharing, what's going on in a given day. At least if you work at a big tech company, you'll think you have all these secrets, and then they're talking about you. Such is life. Don't get upset about it. Welcome to being a manager. It goes with the territory. Think about, corporate HR departments. You could talk to them. A lot of times they have a model that talks about like what they use. There's different names, there's different surveys, there's all these kinds of things. They typically match salary range to a geography, and then they want to have a model that pays kind of reasonably within that. I've reached out to recruiters a lot. Some of y'all might know Mark Cunningham, been an awesome recruiter in Austin for a super long time. I can make a connection if you want to. He knows the market because he's sitting there every single day. Oh yeah, the market is ignorant of your raise cap. Don't care. Yeah, we're only limited to 3% raises this year. The market doesn't care. I was like, oh, we've made it from 2% to 3%. Yes, but the market just went up 40%. Oh, but we've never done a big raise like that. It makes no difference. The market is the market. And between 12 and 22, it was a job hunters salary acquirers market. So there you go. Pay for market value replacement costs. That's like try to do that as much as possible. If you lose somebody, of course, like, somebody outside of your world will say like, hey, shouldn't be that hard. I can get this person, I can get 3 of these people for that same title. And you're like, yes, but that person doesn't know the stuff and delivering that value, right? Like the true replacement cost. So do we have, 6 years, and can we survive 18 security incidents? Each one will crater the company's value by 50%. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic here, right? But like those kinds of things are like, you have to help people know before they go off and do something not informed. Try to keep the comments to myself. Other compelling motivators that you can use, you can do individual or team bonuses. These get really tricky really fast, because then people expect it and it's us versus them or me versus the other people. If you got to do it, I would say use it really freaking carefully, almost to the point where I'd almost never use it. Stock options help people understand what they're really worth. We did it in my last company, Cumulo, and it was kind of like, here's the model. We put it on paper. Some people are scared. It's like, I got 10,000 options. I'm like, but do you know what that means? Well, 10,000, like that's like $10,000, right? No, it's like, that's not what it means. Like, it's really hard to understand this, especially because most people are not finance professionals and like understand the level of risk. Restricted stock units, especially a public company, more liquid, usually going to get fewer of them or less value. Have some interesting, holdouts on time and stuff like that. Benefits can be really useful for people, right? Like in the US, like health insurance is like one of the most key things that's tied to our job. People get really into the detail of health benefits, and so they should, because it just keeps getting much, much worse every year that goes by. And make sure that candidates understand them, like so they can like truly understand what you get. Uh, Here's just a pay scale, like title, location, percentile kind of thing. That's what these companies do. Okay, here are my secrets. I'm going to give away, and then I'm going to put them on this recording, and then I'm going to get fired because I'm sharing them. But anyway, I'll do it anyway.
But it'll be worth it.
It'll be worth it. I'll go out in a blaze of glory. Large company secrets, challenges. And really, like, are these really secrets? Probably not. But like, I think of them as constraints. And for those of us like Ben and I have worked at Amazon, we say like, constraints breed creativity, right? So like, how do you actually work within these constraints? The reality is you have little control of your budget. Almost everything is in the process. Last in usually has the highest salary. Sorry, that's how it works, because the market went up and we can't raise the other people because that's too big of a raise for them. Does that make sense? No, but it is the way it is. You have acquisition if you get acquired. Max was talking about I got acquired. You have a salary range that's here. You have the acquisition. I just got acquired again, by the way. I was at another small company, and then we just got acquired by another big company because that's what I do. And then you have to deal with these like different salary ranges. You get assigned team members, OMP, other managers' problems, with a different scale. That can be like, they can be like super high, but your team is down here. These people might not contribute as much. How do you deal with that? Fixed annual raise pool. Stack ranking, competition with other managers. GE did something in 1983, so we're going to do what GE did in 1983. So let's go off and do that, because that's a good idea, because we are both GE and it's still 1983, right? Right? Right.
And someone commented about Jack Welch actually in the chat,
Okay.
like the 70-20-10, like whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it was used at Motive too. I will say, it was, for those of you who remember Motive, it was 100% used at Motive. It was used at a lot of different companies. Amazon has its own spin on it. Performance reviews tied to compensation, that sort of starts seeming like a good idea until you realize that it's kind of not. Percentage limited promotions. I can't have, this was a high performance thing. Like, I had very senior folks, and they're like, well, we can't have people at this level because that means you have too many people at a high level. I'm like, yes, but they are like performance engineering experts and software engineering experts that have been doing this for 25 years. Like, they know how to do these massive things that generate massive amounts of money. Yeah, but that's just too many. Okay. It wasn't even a money thing. Public company issues, you got regulations, you got compliance you have to deal with. So these are the challenges. Opportunities. There's a ton of options at the big companies that make up the full comp. I won't go through all these or read it to you. Team members tend to be less salary sensitive because the big company is stable, right? Right. Right. I've tried to dispel that myth so many times, and people don't believe me. You can game the system. You can like build strong HR relationship. Yeah, it's sort of like politics. Be highly skeptical of losing poor performing team members to fund raises for top performers. that almost never works. It seems like a great idea, and why wouldn't you want to do that? But again, you don't have budget, so you probably can't do that. You should probably just, if somebody's not doing well, you should probably help manage them out or help manage them in. You build a resilient team that handles people leaving. I've never seen any company do this as well as Amazon. They expect you to not be there for more than 20 months. So 22 months for an industry hire. So like it's actually really done well. Be prepared for an emergency response plan. If it's kind of like some companies are like, if they leave and get a job offer, then that's how they can get a raise. And you're like, that's a dumb idea, but okay. Uh, so, get your writing together, your statistic, your persuasive presentation skills to tell your story. It sort of sucks, but that's that's part of the job at the big company. Medium company, you've got sort of an immature developing, kind of it's like developing practices around all like models of raises, salaries, promotions. It's like incongruent, like things that are sort of like this somewhere don't work that way, somewhere else. Find the helpers, as Mr. Rogers says. Like he might, oh, these are the challenges. I'll get into how you do it. You must be part of developing the system, right? Like just go do it. Go insert yourself. Go figure out how to do it to fix these potential systemic issues. Spirit of partnership. This is me not trying to say like HR bad or anything like that. Like HR is trying to do a job. We're trying to do a job. Let's try to see each other. Find the helpers, as Mr. Roger might say. And then if it doesn't work, advocate for change. And by the way, anytime somebody complains about something, I love people that complain about things, especially when they say, I have a plan or I'm willing to help be the person that solves it. And be prepared for spending a lot of extra time that's not in your job and that likely won't be rewarded if you care about this thing. There you go.
Exactly.
All right, small company secrets, and I'm gonna hopefully wrap this up real soon. Challenges: you have limited access to cash. Every like investors will look at every single person and how much they make and question you on every single thing. Rapidly changing salary scale, calibration as the team grows and you hire people. Immature management practices. Everyone's hands on. That's the nice thing is like if you're a manager, you can own everything and have full control of it. Yay! I got what I wanted, but I can't get that much. So try not to speak in terms of headcount. Again, it's just dollars. Like in the small companies, dollars tend to make a lot more sense. Cost of goods sold, earning before interest, debt, taxes, and amortization, EBITDA. Like learn how to speak those kinds of things so you can actually persuade other people. Have a story for every single team member if there's questions. Investors and execs are going to be involved in every expense. Build a system, I should probably say this more positively, that prevents any poor practices that come in as quote unquote best practices. We're getting bigger, we need a best practice. Yeah, we're getting bigger, we need to improve our systems. That's would be my response. My super secret tactics that I'll end on. If salaries are raising and there's other risks, employ variable compensation. That's my way of saying like figure out how to pay for like awesome outcomes if you need to, violating that rule that I said previously and get alignment on doing that. Again, this is like the nuclear kind of option. If all else fails, there's an egregious issue, and you got to figure out something right. Most managers can sort of like have everybody talks about this unlimited PTO policy now that has changed since I put this presentation. It can be a motivating factor. It has an effect on increasing salary. And the final one, hey, you're getting paid. How much are you willing to put up to fund your team? Pretty extreme, but
That is extreme. Yeah.
it's your budget. If you say this is your budget and you're part of your own budget, what are you willing to do? And that is kind of a tough call to make. And there's lots of ways to play that out. Just a couple of things. Take a look at this if you want to. This elephant in the room. This is appraisals and compensation, all the things that were tried and failed. This is not available any longer. I don't know if it's on YouTube, but I have the PDF. It was an Agile Austin presentation many, many years ago, and they're not talking about this anymore. And it's like nuggets of wisdom abound. There's a couple books here. Get rid of the performance review, Slack, Drive, and Hard Thing About Hard Things. I've got some other presentations that I probably had here. Agile performance reviews, my blog, and a little bit about me. So that is it. That's I know. Once again, I monologued for a real long time. And I know we start on time and end on time, but I'm here for questions. And if you guys want to reach out and contact me, I'm around too. And I'm also on Agile Awesome Slack.
Yeah, and thank you, Matt. Well, before we say anything else, thank you, Matt, for showing up today. Round of applause for Matt. Always awesome to hear from you and to learn from you and all of that. And yes, we are going to be done in 3 minutes. So totally understand if people have to drop off to their next engagement, meeting, etc. We'll stick around a little bit beyond that, right? And we'll keep the recording going. And stay well and happy Friday if you drop off. Okay. Matt, first thing there was Alan that was asking about sharing Mark's information. I think I might have not paid attention that point. Sorry, but there was someone that you were speaking about.
Oh, Mark Cunningham. Yeah.
Mark Cunningham. So Alan, that addresses your question, right? It's
You can
Mark
find him on LinkedIn. And you can hit me up on LinkedIn too. I can connect you to Mark's been around for 2005 is when I met him. He was the recruiter that brought me to Motive many years ago. So, and he has an amazing, he writes a lot about what's happening and he shares absolutely true stories. And I don't know of anybody else in the business who shares what's really going on with real stories as much as Mark does.
Is he at
That's
the
awesome.
bidding network?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Found him. Thank you.
Yeah, he's a great person to follow. Look at what he writes. It's just like, I can't believe, I mean, he's got to be like, I don't know. He's been doing it for a real long time and just does such a good job. So,
Well, now you got me curious. I'm gonna put him in there. Mark Cunningham at the Bidding Network.
yep. It's like been essentially him as kind of a one-stop shop. He knows, I don't know if Austin is always like 2 degrees of separation for everyone. I think Mark Cunningham is like 1.2 or something. Like he seems to know absolutely everybody and has known absolutely everybody in Austin for many, many years.
Exactly. No, thank you. It's Keith Instant Connect. Folks, is there any question? There was NB was sharing a few things. For example,
Surprise vacations. Yeah, that was cool. That's great.
yeah, how devs churn a lot in roles, like, especially at the start of their career, they
Yep.
churn every year or so, to learn new things and everything.
It'll be interesting to see with these sort of the current political climate of folks that might decide to stay in Canada. I have worked with folks at High Performance as Max, like High Performance leadership team was all folks from Canada that came down, these amazing leaders who were vignette guys back in the day, men and women, when I say guys. And
Interesting.
they might go back to Canada. Like like that next generation might either go back or stay in Canada now. It's actually the same is true of India. Like folks from India are considering whether to come to the US. It was kind of like the golden ticket. My wife's from India. She came here in 1999. And that was like a big deal, but there's so much opportunity now in these other countries. When I say the world is flat, it's like they're just starting businesses in these other countries now. They've learned, and it's our job as a United States citizens, I think, to make this an awesome place to come and build your career from wherever you're from.
From wherever you're from, yeah. And I think that we got a taste of that in the AI space with DeepSeek, that good products can be created everywhere. So
Yep, absolutely.
there might be changes in the future.
There's always changes.
Yeah. Sorry, did someone have a question? Just feel free to chime in. Like, we're here for still a few minutes. Jack Welsh, I still don't understand why that became so popular.
Because it worked. I mean,
it didn't, but it gave the illusion of working.
Yeah, but if you had GE, which was GE said we're going to be number 1 or 2 in every market we enter in the 1980s, and they were, as a company, they were largely successful, and that was the model that they shared. It was not a long term, because GE clearly stopped being good,
It
right?
stopped. Exactly.
But it attracted it worked for the time that was in the context that it was in. I'm like, a lot of things work for companies, and it's like, but you can't cargo cult like, oh, Amazon does this or GE did that or those kinds
And
of
you
things.
take it. And
Which
yes.
is why I think it's back to the earlier thing. It's more important to learn about the failure. Why doesn't it work? Why did it stop working? Because GE is not number one or number two. Like, you know, so this was one practice that they had, but even folks like Amazon, like they have a lot of practices, and their practice before COVID was like, nobody worked from home at Amazon. Like being in the office was like sacred. I mean, people would like, I have to go get a package. It was like the amount of people like you would tell just to like go get a package here in Seattle. Like, I'm going to be here at home from this hour to this hour. I'm talking about senior level people, right? I mean, I'm not talking about just like interns. It was such a thing. And then overnight, it changed. Like, we employ people wherever and their talent is the best. And then it was like, yeah. And then after
And
COVID
now
went away,
go back.
then it's time to get back to the RTO. And people are like, but. And I'm like, that was never Amazon. I'm sorry, that was never Amazon to like go live wherever you want to. And so people, my wife works for Amazon, by the way. So like she's going to be going RTO. But we knew that. I was like, this isn't a real thing, right? She's like, yeah, I know. It's like it's a temporary thing. So anyway.
Yeah. They're very much all going back to the office. And it's not just an Amazon thing.
Right.
There are a lot of folks.
Yep.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm available. I'll help us end on time-ish. And thank you all. Lots of thanks from y'all. Thanks for listening to me again. One of my greatest weaknesses is just like talking. I have so much to get out. So
I
like I want the questions, and if people look at the material and they want to like engage deeply, I love talking about this stuff, mostly because by engaging in like curiosity and not assuming I'm right about things, then I learn a lot personally. So thank you all very much for having me today.
Yeah.
Great to
And
see
I
that.
will just conclude. Yeah, and I'll just conclude by saying, Matt, this is such an important topic that I believe doesn't get spoken about enough, because when you're talking about culture change, work change, transformations, like how people get compensated is among the top things. And you've got to address that also, because that can have a big impact on everything you do. Thank you, Matt. Happy Friday, everybody.
Right on.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
weekend.
See you in a couple months.
See ya.
Thank you.
Cheers. And we are stopping the recording. Bye.